All right, well, let me call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone on the screen. Welcome everybody who is watching at home, be it or at work, wherever you are, live or perhaps on video. Welcome to tonight's special board meeting. I'm Neil Goldman, President of the Weisburn Board of Trustees. We have a single item on our agenda this evening. This is a special board meeting. Our regular board meeting will happen tomorrow night. We will be hearing from our consultants on the Weisburn Da Vinci Strategic Partnership and more on this shortly. We will again have our regular board meeting tomorrow night with a full agenda, but let's start for now with a motion to adopt tonight's agenda, please.
I'll move. You have a motion?
Thank you, Roger.
Second.
Thank you, Israel. Let us start our meetings as we always do, remembering, thankful for where we are, the country we're in, and the freedoms we have. Dr. Harbeck, if you would be so kind to lead us in the flag salute.
I will. Please stand. Hand on your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. We'll now turn to comments from the public, always giving an opportunity to hear from our community. Ms. Subaki, do we have comments this evening?
We do not have any comments this evening.
So Ms. Subaki is not only can solve any problems, she's obviously incredibly efficient. Thank you very much. There will be opportunity for comments again tomorrow night. So if you have something you wish to send us or share with us, we always look forward to hearing from you. We will now turn to our consultants, Drs. Kent Rhodes and Ann Fireherm, who have become trusted advocates for both Weisburn and Da Vinci in this process. We engaged their services in an effort to enhance our strategic partnership back in January of this year. As an outgrowth of my conversations with Dr. Brand, Dr. Wonder, and Dr. Silvers, and the valued input of everybody on this screen, including both boards and the cabinets, with the goal of reconnecting and reaffirming our partnership moving forward. Throughout these times, Dr. Brand and I have continued to meet regularly. Dr. Wonder and Dr. Silvers have met regularly, and many board members have reached out, and we always appreciate those efforts. I also want to send a shout out to Brian Meath for a very productive conversation this last week, and to Ray Santiago on the Da Vinci board for reaching out to Dr. Silvers as well. We've held these conversations in confidence, but we appreciate the outreach. The goal of this consulting work, again, and these conversations, is to find the best answers into the future for both our organizations moving forward. I thank everybody involved for their efforts to do so. Finally, as we lead into this presentation, we'd be remiss not to recognize Wendy Subaki, thank you, Wendy, and Allison Woolworth, whose contributions were exceptional in their coordination of everybody. And finally, also to the cabinet members here tonight and the leaders from both organizations, as well as the dozen or so community members who also shared their time and perspectives with the consultants. So thank you all for your help. Dr. Silvers, anything you'd like to add before we get going this evening?
Dr. Goldman, I think you said it better than I could, but I do want to thank the team, everybody who was involved. I think there were 30 plus interviews, or maybe interviewees. I'd leave that to Kent and Ann to share the details. I know it was there were a lot of moving pieces. Also want to thank Wendy for her coordination, and certainly thank you to everybody that was a part of it. So looking forward to hearing the presentation. Thank you.
All right, well, with that said, Dr. Rhodes, Dr. Fireherm, we will turn it to you and look forward to your thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Goldman, and thank you, everyone. We want to start first by just saying, adding thanks to everyone's enthusiastic participation in our data collection process, by which we talked to I think 35 people. We've got a slide, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. And we're struck by so many positive things. That the community in which you live and work, in which you educate children, in which your mission in life is to take care of kids, became so clear to us. And I can speak for both of us that our lives are enriched, and we are honored to be able to work with you here. One of the things that, just by way of introduction, that I want to say is one of the things that I have a lot of experience working with family-owned and run enterprises. And I am struck with the comparisons of family working together to keep up with strategy in their enterprise that has changed. So, and that is the work that I do, and I see parallels everywhere. And so one of the things I just want to start with is we see everything that you're challenged with and everything you're looking at wanting to move forward with as being very normal. That there's nothing, we didn't find that there's anything wrong with anyone or any group or agency. I think it's certainly, there's complexity involved, but essentially, a lot of what you've been experiencing, we believe, is just because of natural growth and natural maturity. And it's time to do a little bit of catching up to that. And that's a normal sort of process. So with that, we do have slides to show. We'll try to be talking. We'll try not to read the slides so much. We have a lot we'd like to talk about, but if we could start sharing those, that would be great. And thank you, Wendy. So one of the things that Ann and I think that we've talked to all of you. Let me just, for those of you though that have joined us, may not know who we are. Ann and I both are professors at Pepperdine University, and we both come with a great deal of conflict resolution background and training, and we also are organization development or OD professionals, and that may not mean a lot to a lot of you, except that these kinds of challenges are things that we carry a lot of expertise in and a lot of interest. And so that's why we were selected to come and do some work here with you all. One of the things that we always like to do is we feel like it's an important piece of this is to, of course, set up a little bit of our agenda. So I'm going to turn it over to Ann and we'll go to the next slide.
Great. Thank you, Kent. And also thank you, Wendy, for getting me into this meeting successfully here. So we'd like to do a kind of a brief check-in. And one of the things that we believe in is to get people's voices in the room. That may not be common at a board meeting, but I do have a question for all of you if you want to participate. And then we really want to set the stage and part of the background and what we found. We are going to present our findings. By the way, we have reams of pages of notes, and half of my computer, I think, is interview notes.
Mine too.
Yeah, but we're not giving all of those. We tried to condense it. We knew we had limited time. So we're going to give you categories and themes. There are some points of pride we think that you all had. We also have a notion called polarities, which it talks about differences. So we saw some commonalities, we saw some differences, and we're going to present those. We promised that we would talk about recommendations or ways forward, and are going to make those by kind of the categories that we found some real interest in. So let me just start with then the quote unquote brief check-in or getting voices in the room. And so for my voice in the room, I took this on because Kent is a friend and colleague and said, I think it should be interesting. And what I found is that I became quite committed to all of your successes. And I'm an educator. I even have somewhere in the background a degree in elementary education. So that's from way back when. Education has always been in my heart. And so I come with this with my heart as well as my intellect and sorting capability. So my check-in is that I come to you with heart, and my other check-in is gratitude for being involved. So if anyone else would like to just check in with, kind of where they are now, are you interested? Are you anxious? Are you worn out? Are you? So, and if not, just say hi. So if we could do that, Hey, Wendy, could you shut down the slide deck for a moment?
Sure.
Thanks. I know you're like, this is not what we do at board meetings.
This is not normal.
Oh, well, welcome to us.
I'll start if
Thanks, Roger.
any other comments. Just for my check-in, I'm really interested in hearing how you described it, Kent, the experience due to natural growth and maturity. I think that's a wonderful statement because we have a partnership with Wiseman Da Vinci for many years now. And even when we started this process in developing the MOU, none of us really knew what we were getting into. We had a great deal of excitement and to use Anne's word, commitment to what we were doing, but things evolve, right? So I think we find ourselves right in that stage about looking for natural growth and maturity, and also trying to overcome some challenges and really to understand those, to ensure that we still meeting the needs of our community, right? And really looking forward to hearing your recommendations and what you found out. So that's my check-in. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
My check-in is, hi, everybody. Good to see you and good to be part of this discussion today. My general philosophy of life, I guess, both at home and at work and personally, is problem solving. I like to think that if we're in chaos, there are ways to bring order to that chaos. My education, my work life, everything sort of focuses on that way of thinking. And so I appreciate that what we're doing this evening is finding ourselves in somewhat of a state of chaos, and that what you're going to bring to us are some suggestions for how to bring order to a situation that has perhaps moved in different directions and from different parts of our family and different parts of our community, both education and community members. And I would like to understand how to bring some order to what we've been dealing with in a way that perhaps hasn't been as orderly as we would like. So that's from me.
Thanks, Joanne. Others?
Yeah.
You guys hear enough from me, but I think the framework, I appreciate both Roger and Joanne's comments, that I bring to this is optimism and hope. I believe in an idea that's overly simplistic, but positive thoughts produce positive results, negative thoughts produce negative results. So I'm bringing the positivity today and excited about the opportunity that we can collectively learn from this experience and build better for the future.
Thank you, Neil.
Just to say, we didn't build this to destroy it or to break it apart. That wasn't the goal then, and it's definitely not the goal now. So looking for good ways to bring us back together and working well together and making it work.
Thank you so much, Israel. Everybody can say something. You don't have to be on the
Chime
board.
in.
I'll say something if that's okay. I didn't know it was just for the board, or I can say something too here.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. I think, I enter this with, as well, with an open heart, open mind, with a sense of excitement as to what the future can bring. And despite any challenges, I feel confident and committed to be able to overcome those. And I agree with Joanne as well in that problem solving is a really important part of relationships, a part of both personal and work and professional. And that's what we're here to do. So I feel very committed to that process and look forward to the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake.
I'm going to say I'm curious to hear what this is about. I'm new to Wiseburn, and so it's an interesting take, just kind of seeing what's going to unfold. So curious to see what this is all about.
Great. Thanks, Nisha. Others? Maybe just Eileen. I see you're unmuted.
Oh, I am unmuted. No,
You can-
I'm also excited. This is I know that you've been working with us for a while and going through all of this work. It's just wonderful to be together, even on Zoom, to talk about an important topic, because we all want, I think, success and partnership.
Great. Thanks, Eileen. Peggy?
Hi, I'm the Director of Psychological Services, and I started in November. and I used to work here several years back, but I also subsequently, between that time and now, had the opportunity to work with Da Vinci as well as a consultant for special education. So I've gotten to see the inner workings of both organizations, one organization, whatever we're calling ourselves, and they're both very unique and wonderful organizations. So I'm looking forward to seeing your findings and what we can do to help improve what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Wendy, we're not going to let you off the hook.
I thought you would. I'm driving. No, I'm very, very grateful. I've enjoyed this entire experience with Kent and Ann, and I'm really excited to hear what you're going to present this evening, because it was a really wonderful process. So.
Thank you, Wendy.
Well, then with that, I'll check in real quickly and just say I feel very optimistic. And let me be clear about this. For outside looking in people, we have heard a lot. And one of the things that's to our advantage as outside people looking in, people talk to us and they talk openly, and we have a great deal of confidence. And I am very optimistic, even with all of that information coming in. So if you go to the next slide, just briefly, the next slide, I've got to get it up first, is we started off looking at supporting sort of documentation. Now, what kind of official sorts of things do we have that we can look at? Let's see, go ahead and go to the next slide, Wendy, please. Thank you. You may recognize this from the Magna Carta. I'm not going to read it, but there are words there that that are important and are important to everyone we talk to. Highly interdependent, highly cooperative, collaborative, high degree of flexibility, words that we know mean things to everyone. And so we wanted to set the stage that this was important to us, that we looked at this and we view this as being a guiding document that still has a great deal of truth to it. And then the next slide is what we're about. And we want to just highlight that again. And wait.
Yeah, why did we put this up here? Well, because this was at the heart of it. Your school board, you're here to educate students. We're here to help you help them be educated. Now we realize many of these are older students and probably Da Vinci, and we realize the privacy concerns that are evident with younger children. So I think we couldn't find as many off the website. But I think just universally, you're not in this business to make a whole lot of money. You're in the business to educate the next generation. And we wanted to appreciate that and know that we were thinking of that as well. So Wendy, if you want to, great. So in setting the stage, Kent and I just wanted to be clear about what our hopes are, right? We hope to provide pretty practical and applicable advice. By the way, I was at the dentist today. One of the fun things that I did today, and as you all know, but they have a lot of advice, right? Flossing and all that, water picks, etc. Very practical. However, it is mine to choose to follow that advice or not. And we understand that that's true for you as well. So we're hoping to be practical, but we realize the decisions are yours to be made. We're also hoping to identify specific problems, offer our guidance from our background and what we know about organizations, education, dynamics. The third one we thought was important, that we strive to be honest, although we might not be popular. You didn't hire us to be popular, as much as we like to be liked, but we hope to be honest in choosing that, honesty over popularity. We certainly based our recommendations on research, And we offer these recommendations in good faith. And that you seriously consider, just like I and the dentist, right? Can you accept them? We understand this is not a one-time shot. This is a longer dialogue, decisions. They're going to require collaborative development, being thoughtful, and but we wouldn't offer them if we didn't think that was possible, that we didn't think you had the energy and commitment to do so. So that's kind of, you know, setting the stage of this. And I think, Kent, you're going to share the background.
I am. So go to the next slide there, Wendy. And we want to, we talk a little bit about our method. You know, we're just enough academics to be researchers as well. So we talked to 35 different people that included board members, staff, foundation members, and a community member or two, and multiple follow-up conversations. So certainly 35 individuals, but multiple conversations across there. We spent time looking at viewing recent school board meetings for both Wiseburn and for Da Vinci, and attending them in real time. We looked at documents. We reviewed them, the Magna Carta, the facilities use agreement, drafts of communications that were going to be going out and did go out. We looked at strategic plans, primarily from Da Vinci. We looked at a lot of different public documents about charter schools, about what authorizers, about laws that regulate schools and charters. And I think we got a little bit of an education ourselves about some of that. We looked at your websites. Well, we looked at both websites in some detail, and then we also looked carefully at the California Schools Dashboard websites for the Wiseburn Unified District, Da Vinci, El Segundo, Hawthorne, and Miracosta. Found that to be very insightful as well. And this is just the high level things. There were a lot of other things we looked at as well. And so the next slide, Wendy. Here through all of our sorting, and so if you've done qualitative research, you know how this goes. What we do, we hear everyone. We have listening sessions where we have just a few questions that we ask, and sometimes we ask one or two, and people talk, and we collect everything that they're saying confidentially and anonymously. And once we have all of those pages and pages and reams of things that people have said, and sentiments and perspectives, we're able to go through and identify categories and themes. In other words, things that came up more often than others, things that people seem to be more concerned about. And so by doing this, we're able to gain and glean from all of those conversations some core important pieces to pay attention to. And so by doing this, we're able to that's why we call it looking at data. We're actually able to look at the data and let that inform us and inform you more than anything else. So the four categories that we found were around governance. That was mentioned at least 70% of the time, and we were conservative about putting these percentages down. And governance means for both the Wiseburn Unified School District and for Da Vinci schools, how they are managed and how they're governed across the board, not just with boards, but also with staff and also with administration. And so that was the first category. The second category was communication at 57%, and how communication is created and how it moves out from the organizations, from each organization. Then there was respect, appreciation, and understanding. Was mentioned 40% of the time in some way, that was something that was really important for people in moving forward. And then both fiscal and physical plant, that involves both how funding works and how buildings and facilities are used by both entities, by both the Unified School District and by Da Vinci Schools. So from that, though, we do a little bit of a deeper dive. And so, Wendy, if you go to the next slide, Anne will take us through themes.
Sure. So the first category, governance, you see it covers quite a bit. By the way, we decided to mention this from most to least frequency. We also took this from the responses to 3 wishes. I don't know if you remember those questions, but kind of near the end, we kind of said, well, summarizing, what are your 3 wishes from, going forward? And the first prominent theme in governance was, we can work this out. We didn't build it to break it up, 2 boards working together. That kind of sentiment, by the way, we tried not to do any direct quotes. Sorry, Israel, I heard you say this before. We didn't build it to break it up. Sorry if that was yours, but maybe somebody else said it too. So it's this real notion that we can, let's do this, 2 boards working together. The next kind of frequently mentioned was the Magna Carta, and we need to revise that. No one said that, oh yeah, it's done, it's good, let's just keep moving on. There was recognition that that needed to be revised. Some ideas were, do we need a decision tree for different situations? Do we need processes for decision making? That's not quite specified in there. The third most often mentioned was leadership, board, and or staff should be changed. Kent and I debated about putting this one in there. And it's like, ooh, was that me, that you're talking about? We are happy to talk with anyone about that. But here's what we've concluded. Often, when things are tense, by the way, we thought, oh my gosh, we're right in the midst of, the reopening and what is this about? And what a time to consult with an organization. What a time to gather information. And so for a little bit of time, we thought, this is the worst thing, the worst timing. And then we thought, no, I think it's the best timing to really figure out what was going on. Having said that, oftentimes, and I think you know this, being on boards or, staff, oftentimes people will bundle their concerns and lay it at the foot of a leader. Lay it at the foot of the board and tend to personalize it, not saying that none of us could be better than we are, but we do think that that was mentioned and that could have been happening, that people's energy got bundled around and got laid on to a particular board or staff member. Then it came, there weren't a lot of these, but there were some, that Da Vinci should find a new authorizer. There were comments about the curriculum, the seamless pathway, that Wiseburn Unified School District take over Da Vinci High School administration. You kind of see some opposites here, and that have one board with 2 areas of focus. So now you can say, well, I thought I said something about governance. Again, we tried to theme it, and we hope that people can find their voice in here in our list of themes, just for governance. The next one. And by the way, if you are wanting clarifying questions or have them, go ahead and jot them down. We'll have a space at the end for clarification. Wendy, how about the next one on communication? This is another kind of heavy hitting theme. And the first one was really people talking about, we need active and we need consistent communication, not just at the board level, not just at the supervisor, but also teachers. Are we including students in some of our communications? But principals. So there was nothing untouched here, right? So a lot of people had ideas about communications. The next in frequency was really Da Vinci reaching out systematically to the community with openness, trying to hear what was going on. So that was another theme around communication. It wasn't with each other, it was Da Vinci with the community. The third one was really trying to understand more clearly roles, responsibilities, strengths of the other entity, if you will. There were comments about Matt and Blake being on the same page. I don't know if we have any creative juices here. I'm sure we do. Joint videos, letters, just really being on the same page and demonstrating it. Then there were some comments about, hey, we really need to get down and talk, really constructively, really honestly. And then the last one was this notion, and we discovered that there was a staff kind of liaison position between the two organizations. And, a lot of things were happening, right? That I think have contributed to this fraction. And that role disappeared. COVID happened. The board meetings that were jointly weren't. So a lot of things were going on that contributed to, I think, this area of communication being a theme. Kent, I think you have the last one.
Thanks, Anne. So Wendy, go to the next slide, please. So the core category of respect, appreciation, and understanding. The themes that came out of this, the one that was most mentioned was a wish that we respect the other schools, be glad that we're together, celebrate our unique strengths and relationship. And the flip side of that, because we counted some of these as well as themes, were that was sometimes expressed in the negative. We wish that we had more of this because it's not happening. And so, or we've lost this. So there was a sense of not only we wish we were doing that, but a sense of loss that it had happened at one point. The next thing is that there are around operating assumptions, values, and it's interesting. Everyone, at least intellectually, and I believe also in their hearts, understand that kids are the focus. But it's amazing how it's easy to get distracted from that. Some of you have heard me use this example. I've got a very good friend who is a family law attorney, and she does lots of mediation of divorces. And one of the things that she does, she requires her clients when they come to see her, the couple, that they bring a photograph in a frame of their children, and she asks them to place it on the desk facing them. And throughout their meeting, from time to time, she'll take her pen and she'll tap on the photo and say, no, this conversation is about these people, not about you. That's about these people. And I thought, that's what this is. There's a lot of other things. There's a lot of adult things going on here that have to be tended to and will be tended to. And even though we know the kids are the focus, sometimes we just kind of need to okay, but what does that mean? And how do we get back to that? So we heard a lot of that. And also as a part of that, we'll address this a little bit further in terms of assumptions. We heard a lot of just even in definition of terms, a lot of differences and in how those definition of terms are operationally acted on. And so those themes came up as really important. Another one was the feuding and toxicity must stop. And this is the fact that we use the words. Those are not words that we chose ourselves. These were words that people used. And so while you might not be surprised to actually see that on a slide, we thought it was important for you to know that that this is something that was a theme that people are understanding and feeling and experiencing, and that as a part of that, apologies may be needed in order to move forward the way that you would like to. There was a wish that and a theme that know that each entity understands the other and demonstrates it. So there's the flip side of that was that people have expressed that they're see some defensive posturing that sometimes doesn't allow that to come through. And then especially this was a theme for people in the Wiseburn Unified School District to want to be a sought after district. And I should add more so than you already are. But that became a theme there as well. I apologize if you're looking at me the sun's coming through my window here. I'll have to adjust it here in a minute. But if you go to the next slide, the final category, fiscal and physical plant. the themes were pretty straightforward. Let's get the buildings and the grounds finished. Let's get things completed. Let's develop a checklist and timeline of work and get it done. So it's very action oriented. Let Da Vinci help with the money to complete work if necessary. And then more accountability with the Da Vinci finances, more transparency around some of that. So those were themes that came up there as well. So then the next slide. And well, no, let me just briefly highlight the points of pride. So with all of that, those themes, some of them were well, they were all just themes. This is what people said, but we also heard consistently points of pride, and we decided to put these separately because people tended to talk to us about, well, first, let me say, this is what's good, this is what's right, before I launch into letting you know what I think we need to really pay attention to. And so I think these are important. Universally, people indicated a dedication to facilitating the best for students. Yes, I've said that, and that's really true. It was interesting that Da Vinci is an excellent constellation of schools. We heard that over and over again. It's good. The Wiseburn Unified School District provides excellent education K through 8. It's caring, its foundational skills and knowledge are not only demonstrated by teachers, but kids come away with these things as well. We attract families to the area due to the reputation of schools, both Da Vinci and K through 8. Each board is publicly productive, civil, and respectful. And for the people that made those comments that have been around boards, they wanted to make sure that we understood that that's not always the case in a lot of boards, but these boards, yes. Board members, both boards are viewed as intelligent and committed. It's a very unusual and unique partnership, unlike any other, that is between the Wiseburn Unified School District and Da Vinci Schools. And what we started with, we want to make our way through this. We acknowledge this is the most troubled time we've ever had, and we have the capability to be creative and synergistic. So these were themes that were glowing themes that we don't have any recommendations for, except keep this up. So that's why we have them there on a slide. So the next slide, Anne.
Sure. We'll let you fix your window.
Yeah.
Although the light is shining on you. Maybe that's symbolic. I don't know. So we also found, and we think that some of these may be at the heart of some of the, evolution and some of the things that you're working on. It's around identity, it's around purpose and assumptions. Identity, purpose, and assumptions. And if you look at this from Wiseburn, and you can certainly be here and correct us if we're wrong, would say that we're a unified school district. Our identity is providing a unified K through 12 education, right, for the Wiseburn community. And I think that's primary, and also its permitted students, right? And Da Vinci serves as our high school, and we have oversight. This would be kind of the purpose, identity. Some assumptions are built into that. Da Vinci affiliated members would say we're independent charter schools. Our identity is in the independence and providing a 21st century education to all of our students. It's a model for the world. And Da Vinci serves multiple communities, including Wiseburn. And Wiseburn Unified School District is our authorizer. Now, there's some interesting divergence underneath those. And their community. In fact, we heard this going into it. I think, it's like, we have different definitions of community, right? Wiseburn community is more geographically bound. Although you really care about permitted students, but more geographically bound, whereas Da Vinci is more like, whoever's a student here. So those are two divergent assumptions. We thought there were some other key words around independence. What did that mean? What does oversight mean? What does accountability mean? What does unified mean? And so, and you'll see this in some of our recommendations. And this is where I think, you know, purpose, of course, with all those assumptions comes what's our purpose, and those are different. Do they have to be in conflict? Not necessarily, but it's best to understand those. And so, Wendy, with that, the next slide, I'm giving you a color map. Okay, we said, what is that? What kind of thing is going on? And as Kent has said, we've worked with you know, family business, conflict management, things like that. This is a concept of polarities or paradox, right? And you think of polarities, think just for yourselves of, and there's one pole, right? Two poles, polarities. One pole is, say, work life, right? And that's all great. You're all working, feel good about that. There's also a thing called home life, right? And people talk about work-life balance. They're trying to balance polarities, right? So work, life. If you get too far off on one, you're kind of like tipped. The scale is tipped, right? Too far one way. Too much work, you're a workaholic, you never get time to relax, et cetera, right? If too much on home, you're like, who needs money? It's like, well, I guess we do need money. Wait a minute, I can't just take a permanent vacation. So you can overextend on either pole. And we think there's some polarities going on with this relationship. And if you look at, there's a green spiral going up, and the way to quote unquote manage polarities is how can you have the best of both? And it's synergy, right? And you have the virtual or virtuous spiral going up to a greater purpose statement. And we think that that may have been some of the language that was in the original Magna Carta, right? You had a kind of a fairly grand purpose, by the way, as we read it. So it's how do you do both and you get this greater purpose. Conversely, if you do either or, either only work or only home, right? Then you end up in a deeper fear and it kind of splits. So you're not creating synergy. So we think that this may be a way to understand some of what's going on. Because actually the Magna Carta, you did start out with two different kind of systems. I think, you know, you talked about how you started out and where are we now. So we just thought that might be a way to frame what's going on in terms of polarities and how do you manage the tension between those. Can't I?
Thank you, Anne. Yes. So, so of course you're not going to get away in a presentation like this without a model or some teaching with a couple of professors. And so if you weren't familiar with identities and polarities, you've been introduced now to that model. And I'll give one other example. In one of the previous slides, we talked about the assumptions that are held. And what we found is some of those assumptions, those words, held flashpoints for people. And that's actually one of the things that caused us to think about there's the polarities to be managed. So, you know, what it means for Wiseburn Unified School District to talk about, oh, you know, for us, it's important to be able to better oversee Da Vinci schools. That, you know, that means something, one thing to you and something very different to them. And by the same token, the word independent came to mean something to Da Vinci that didn't mean the same thing to you. And so that polarity literally in those two words that are actually legitimate words to use and apply to this situation. But as is not uncommon, when those kinds of words, when the assumptions about the meaning of those, that's when escalation begins to occur. And we saw just those two words be a source of escalation for for things the last several months. So I thought that's really interesting. So finally, yes, you're thinking, oh, Kent and Ann, get to it, please. Tell us what you'd like for us to do. Think about. And so we did think about ways forward, but not just based on what we heard, but we did a lot of thinking about what are the possibilities here based on what we know. And so here are the big buckets. And the top and the bottom end are the extremes, we think, and then there's the stuff in between. Yeah, and none of this is a surprise to you. Wiseburn Unified School District takes over Da Vinci, whatever that means, but you just take it over. There are costs associated with each of these, though, and we believe there are substantial legal fees, potentially disruptive educational quality to the schools and to kids, and I think it would be possibly further divisive in the community, and it would take a great deal of time. Another option possibility is that one of the Da Vinci schools becomes Wiseburn Unified School District's high school. So, and so sort of imagine sliding out at the second or third floor, or whichever of the high schools might be there, for example. We also, though, after inquiring, realized that there are legal costs there, and also possible disruption to teachers and time. And by the way, these first two, we also didn't think would actually solve for anything in the long run. And we can talk more about that. The third one down is just create a new high school. I mean, that's simple enough. Why not do that? Well, you already know, or else, there are legal costs to that, as well as costs, and again, cost of community and time to do those things. Oh, and look, we have a change in color. Not a surprise. This is where we believe we are and where we would like to base our recommendations. That is to rework the Magna Carta, governance documents, the FUA, other systems, do a complete collaboration reboot. And you're looking at mediation, consulting costs, time, and stakeholder engagement. We also suspect that there might be a way to bring some healing to the community from this approach. It may not be immediate, but we believe that indirectly there could be some benefits to the community. And then at the far end of the scale, we've already mentioned this, that Da Vinci find a new authorizer just seems simple enough. And it's actually, we found out it's very doable. However, we also know that there would be, after doing some research, finding out there would be substantial legal costs. There'd be costs around the building, would be further divisive to the community and time. So, this was one of our ways, not only of tipping our hat of what we believe is the way forward. And let me be clear, we believe it strongly, and we recommend strongly that our green boxes are the way forward. And to some extent, while you have at least these 5 choices, the cost involved in the others make them either completely unpalatable or self-destructive. And I just say that as plainly as I can. And want to be really clear, this has nothing to do with whether or not Ann and I help you moving forward. We fully believe that you have access to great resources everywhere around you to help you do these things. So this has nothing to do with us stepping in the future. This has to do with, I think, the work that needs to be done. So I want to be really clear about that one. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide, Wendy, thank you. Finally, you say you were getting to recommendations around governance and decision making. Some of this you've already heard. That's one of the nice things also about creating themes and categories, is that sometimes we hear that people already have solutions. They already have good ideas and solutions, and we have borrowed some of those. But here we are. Number one, and by the way, all of these we consider to be short-term first steps. We believe that there will be other phases after this, but we believe these are initial, immediate steps to be taken. Everyone on both boards and key staff agrees to step back from any escalation, and we think we've already seen that occur. And so, including just in any communication that goes out, for example, that's another recommendation later, that's has some way to be vetted by people within both entities. Both superintendents meet to craft some options, and it be a facilitated conversation and a series of facilitated conversations. One of the things that we realized is that both Matt and Blake are not only smart people, they understand the system very well. Not to say that there are not others that do as well, but they happen to sit in chairs that give them a unique perspective in moving forward. But we believe only if they do it together. So I want to be clear about that as well. So the third one is to convene a professionally facilitated joint 2-day offsite workshop that includes both the Wiseburn Unified School District and Da Vinci board members and key staff. The workshop would be held by the end of this year and designed to meet these goals, reach a common understanding of and commitment to key guidelines and operating principles outlined in the Magna Carta, and revise it as necessary to match what is the reality now, and the agreed reality, that both entities reach a shared understanding of oversight and authorizer duties provided by the Magna Carta, and revise the Magna Carta as necessary based on that as well. And that Da Vinci engage in a process of recalibration of its cooperative relationship with Wiseburn Unified School District as its authorizer. And so in other words, maybe rather than emphasize so much the independence, come back to the cooperative relationship that is every bit as important, if not more so, than the independence. And clear steps to be identified and implemented for the coming months at that meeting will happen as well. Now, let me just say this as well. We clearly understand the challenges of doing this. We understand there are budget concerns. We understand that there are laws that regulate being able to, that meetings need to be public. And we believe that there are ways that we can work within that. So I just want you to know that we are very aware of the challenges and the limitations of just simply having an offsite, but we believe it can be done. And we think that it's, even with the challenges of making it work within the legally what you're bound to, we believe that it's worth the effort to do that. So those are clear initial first steps we've got there. So Wendy, if you'll go to the next slide. Communication. Again, these are initial steps that we believe need to be taken sooner than later. Weekly meetings between superintendents, and we've already mentioned that under governance. But then monthly meetings between board presidents, and that already is happening. So we want to be clear that we understand that, but we're saying this needs to continue. There's a really good trend that has begun that we support continuing, and we believe must continue. Superintendents or their designees be informed of and welcomed to cabinet meetings of the other entity. I realize that's easier said than done, people's schedules. But to be able to have a conversation about how do we do that and when would that be most appropriate so that it can be done and actually become a norm with you there. Consideration should be given to hiring the liaison between both entities and the community. We even heard names of people that would be good in that role, and so we think that that's probably an easier one to do, perhaps. We hope that it would be. But that, to me and to us, was one of the places where it was really an indication where the maturing and the growth of both organizations didn't really support that as much as it had at one point. And so you got away from it a little bit, but we think that needs to be revisited. Create clear structures and processes for community data collection and sharing results. This could be a joint process or unique processes for each entity, but the point would be that the information was shared, that the way data was collected is transparent, and would start with a joint communication regarding decisions resulting from this process. So, and this came back to us over and over and over again, that what kind of, because we would ask, what kind of data are you using? Well, and we'd get explanations about data, but it wasn't very clear always. it wasn't clear about, we could ask all kinds of good people associated with Da Vinci, tell us about Weisburn's data collection process for the community and how's it shared with you? And they go, we're not sure, vice versa. And it's like, okay, so there's some connective tissue to be built here. And we believe this is low-hanging fruit that could really benefit. Now let me be clear that the people you have sitting in the chairs that look at communications are excellent. So this had nothing to do with personnel. I want to be really clear about that. It had to do with processes that boards and superintendents oversee and can create. So that was an important piece. Any future issues or opportunities should be addressed by convening a task force of members from both entities, either board, cabinet, or staff. Now, I know that sounds indefinite, but we don't mean it indefinitely. But we do think that in coming months, that needs to be the MO. That needs to be, this is our norm. This is what we do. There's an issue that's come up, and who do we need to get together and make sure that they come up with recommendations to both boards about moving forward. Because that obviously is coming from that there's been a lot of doing our own thing, and that hasn't worked out very well, and so that can shift. Finally, resume joint board meetings, minimum of 2 per year, maybe recommending 3, where collaborative discussions are held, as opposed to only presenting reports. So a difficulty, well, I want you to hear this in with humor, because that's the way that I mean it. So I would tell Anne, it's like, well, it's almost like Da Vinci says, we are independent, and in a 13-year-old boy's voice, by the way, we're independent, and you can't tell us what to do on this area. We're doing this well, and so just leave me alone. And the Weisburn Unified School District is like, now, Bobby, that's, you've got to go to your room and clean it up. And it's like, so, and this sort of dynamic has sort of developed. It's like, well, yeah, let's get through these preteen years or these adolescent years. Let's see if we can't begin to be more collaborative in these kind of things. And so, but the presenting reports, I think, is one of the things. It's like, how do we create a board meeting where there is some overlap in attendance from other board members, in which there's actually conversation and discussion as much or more so than reports. So with that, if you go to the next slide, I'll turn it over to Anne.
Of course, we're telling you what to do, which is exactly what we're not doing. We're presenting a report, and we're saying, it should be a collaborative discussion. So we realize the irony in our recommendations.
Yes,
so
we do.
Forgive us for that. We had this theme of restoring and building trust and appreciation, and we think it's critically important that some of that, and we're calling it connective tissue, be reestablished. Just as your bones need the ligaments, to be kind of flexible, that's how we see this kind of connective tissue. And making sure that public communication reflects mutual appreciation and respect. By the way, in attending some of the board meetings, your board meetings, I have seen that you have, given some hats off to Da Vinci and what they're doing. So, but just kind of make that a mantra. We also thought, and this is where engaging the principals perhaps across the district, creating, what's the narrative? What's the narrative from K through 12? How are we helping our students move through this time in their lives? And we think that might be a beginning point for mutual understandings of kind of these learning pathways that were talked about in some of the findings. Okay, the fun one, plan social events. It's like, really, come on. You think a party's going to fix this, Anne? Well, no. However, we heard that there used to be a little more social connective tissue, right? And that, you know, just getting to know people. The Da Vinci board that we're going to speak to next, you know, has 4 new members. And really I think there's some yearning for that. Who are people as people? And so this is why we actually suggested that. Of course, COVID kind of prevented that. It's not really the same to have it over Zoom, and I know that. And then the 4th one is experiment with an appreciative inquiry approach. And there's, again, sorry, you got 2 professors here. There is a methodology about inquiring about what is to be appreciated from the other person, the other party, the other entity, and rebuild some of that trust. Next slide, Wendy. Okay. All right, the fiscal and physical plan. All right. So you've got as we said, an odd mix of institutional, legal, facilities use agreement. There's kind of this, you know, chess moving stalemate, perhaps, right? Which is, well, Weisberg didn't finish the building of the soccer fields, and then Da Vinci doesn't pay for maintenance, and then Da Vinci pays for ongoing improvements, and it's like a little twist, and it's like a knot. It's like it twisted into a knot, and that. So there are 3 things that we recommend very clearly, which is for you, Weisberg, to explore some creative ways in which the building and grounds might be completed. At first, get an understanding of what those are from each other, right? And set a timeline. The second thing we are strongly recommending is that Da Vinci allocate the deferred maintenance funds to that fund, and that then the facilities use agreement is revised to kind of address and make the way through the knothole. Again, this might be a facilitated conversation. You might pick a few members of the board or a few members of the staff to try and figure this out first. The second recommendation is, we heard some about perhaps there's overlapping or redundant resources, like back office support. There's some equipment. We heard about, I think it was 3D printers, you know, at the middle school and the high school, and how can you jointly understand that or make better use of that across Weisberg Unified School District? And are there training opportunities? So we think that that's an opportunity. And then the third thing, and we're recommending this to Da Vinci, to conduct a stakeholder survey to better address some of the, we heard about the 3 different high schools. It's like they're all on separate floors, they can't go up and down, you know, friendships are somehow diminished because of that. So we're saying maybe take a look at this, right? Do a survey. We're not recommending that a particular action, but at least start understanding that and some of the implications that we heard for that. So those are recommendations in the fiscal and physical. And I think we have one last slide.
You do.
Which is thank you. Kenneth.
So, yes, so thank you for bearing with us. You've been very patient, and appreciate everybody that's also with us observing and watching. Again, there's a lot more we could say. We have a lot more observations, but again, want to be really clear. We believe everything we're presenting in terms of next steps are immediate steps. There are longer term steps that we'd be happy to discuss with you at a different point in time, but we thought this was enough to try to digest at once. In our time frame, we're sort of recommending is by the end of the year that these things need to be started and implemented and going, and some of the things immediately. We should be able to go from there. So while there's not lots of time left, I think we've got about 10 minutes. that we can, if there are any points of clarification that you have. And what I expect is that, yes, Joanne, I see you here in just a second. What we want to ask you to do and expect that you'll do is take this information and do some work together to better understand. And Ann and I are available to certainly answer questions as you go through that process in coming days. But for now, if there is there anything we can do to help clarify? Joanne.
You're muted, Joe.
First of all, thank you very much. Really appreciate the presentation, the order in which your findings were presented. Really easy to follow, really easy to understand. So thank you for that. The recommendations were there were so many. Some of them were overlapping and some I don't understand. So is there any way, and your further comment that we should do all of this by the end of the year,
Yes.
is it really hard to figure out? So
Yeah.
I think we're all ready and interested in the recommendations and sort of doing something so that we don't just wait around.
Mhm.
But is there some way to prioritize or collect
Yes.
these recommendations so that they're not all separate?
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I understand you did the themes
Right.
as we were interviewed, but we need implementation
Yes,
themes.
I'm totally with you. We talked about this, and we were struggling with how to make this actually shorter. But yes, it would be I'm very happy to pull together sort of a cheat sheet of here's what we recommend you start with. Here's the first thing you need to do, the next thing you need to do, and start with there. And that would probably help a lot.
That would really help a lot. Thank you.
We can do
Mhm.
that. Thank you, Joanne. I'm sorry, Ann, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, we do think the first thing though is, and I think there's commitment, Blake, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the two superintendents to meet, not just to meet to share information, but to start crafting some ideas for some of these areas. We think that is a pivotal key relationship between Matt and Blake. The two, sorry, Dr. Wonder and Dr. Silver. So I think
for me, waiting till December to get both boards together is way too long for me.
I agree.
So that to me has to be a lot sooner.
It
And I'd
is.
also like to pair up the superintendents with one board member. And I say that because you need the board perspective when you're getting together between Matt and Blake and not just create something that then the boards aren't going to be in agreement with. I think it's not productive. So having at least one member be there and represent the board, I think would help the process.
Good. Thank you, Israel. That's helpful. And that's not far at all from what our conversation was about. So thank you.
So I have another question. It's not like Matt and Blake haven't been meeting. They
Right.
meet frequently, often, and there's been no gap in those meetings. So
Right.
I'm not convinced that having them meet is what we're really talking about here. So how do the meetings actually become productive? How are they going to build that trust and actually come together to have sort of joint decisions that can be communicated jointly? Because that's obviously the goal. So it's fine to say they should meet weekly. Okay, they've been doing that. So what's going to change?
Well, the word that was in there also was facilitated.
Okay.
So we believe that yes, that there is yes, while they've been meeting, that there's an opportunity to again to build deeper trust and to come and to exactly do that, be a little bit more creative together in what they might be able to recommend. So we view this not weekly necessarily, but we view that this is a facilitated process to start with.
And it may be more directed at some of the specifics, right? What are some ideas for some of the specifics we mentioned to at least get a ball rolling, if you will, and things that would be accepted by the board too. I don't know, Blake, are you comfortable saying anything at this point in time, or?
I'm still processing. I think the biggest, it's sort of my understanding was that there would be a meeting or a series of meetings specific to these items that you that you recommended. So I don't necessarily, it's not our normal kind of check-in meeting or question or getting follow-up on items, but more so very specific to the recommendations within this report.
You are correct. That is correct. That would be more of the agenda for the two of you. Yeah. Good. Thanks for that clarification.
One item or one of the recommendations that I saw in your report here, Anne and Kent, thank you so much for all the work that is evident that you put into it. One thing that definitely stood out is the recommendation to reinstate the liaison position. That is something that we have been discussing. And in fact, Blake, I think we're going to be having an update either at our next board meeting, or we're working on a job description for that position for a Wiseburn position. And I believe Da Vinci's doing that as well. I think that's a great investment in time and resources, because communication is just so important, right? Having those different meetings and having that dialogue, because both Blake and Matt are incredibly busy in their normal days to do these things. So having a liaison or two liaisons in this case that could help and participate in some fashion with that, I think it'll really move us forward and a lot quicker than independent or just with what we have now. But to Joanne's point, that communication has been happening, but I think a supplement with the liaison is really helpful. I think for me, I'd like maybe moving forward, I'd love an opportunity for Kent or Anne to talk a little bit more and get a little bit more clarification with the divergent assumptions under identity. I think, having the common language of what we mean when we say community or independence and oversight, I think just having a common base of understanding really could facilitate that conversation, because if we have different concepts, we're not going to go anywhere. I mean, again, that's why the word assumptions is made, right? If you have, if I'm operating under one assumption and my colleague or counterpart or other alternate on the other, say the DV board has a different assumption, then we're just not really communicating. So I'd like to see if, I don't know if there's maybe a more detailed report or something, or any comments that you can provide us so that I can gain a deeper understanding of what that means. That
yes,
really
yes and no. I think what we imagine is that yes, sooner than later, much sooner than later, that the 2-day offsite should occur, and that would be one of the conversations we would have to have. Or get to have is figuring that out, and we would do that. We have recommendations about how to even do that. But yes, we see that's probably the best way to have everyone in a room, and that'd be one of the tasks.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Again, my thanks. What is our cutoff time here, just so we respect that for you?
I think it was 6:50.
Okay. I agree with the comments that were made. I do believe we need some prioritization. Certainly. I also believe the purpose and identity questions need to be solved collectively. I would see that in my mind as perhaps the first part of the conversation at the joint meetings, because we have to come to an agreement on that so we can build from it. The foundation has to be set. I'd like to see us create that foundation together. The other thing I'd like to see is a timeline, maybe even with objectives that we can reach this by December in a reasonable format. So I think what we're asking for probably is a proposal from the two of you to take it further. You have been very generous with your time. Thank you very much. You've gone above and beyond in the work of what you initially proposed, and for that which we committed to, and thank you. To engage further, I think we'd like to see what that might look like to our joint benefit.
Okay, we can do that. So we'd be basically proposing what we would see as what would be phase 2. If data collection in this was phase 1, and that phase 1 has now come to a close, then phase 2 would begin with here's what we would think you should do and consider doing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that. The other thing that's important, which I think is starting right now before our very eyes, is that you're all coming up with like, hey, I think the liaison is important, or hey, I think purpose and identity might be important. And so, I totally invite you to continue thinking yourselves. What did you hear? What seems to be the most important to all of you as well? So I just wanted to
and to Anne's point, one of the things that we know very clearly is by even just doing this this report and having worked really hard, by the way, to boil it down, so because it is a lot, but that we know also that this within itself is an intervention because of what Ann just said. Your brains are now thinking maybe at a little bit different level, and we go from here, and we do the same presentation, the exact same presentation to the Da Vinci board this evening, and so brains are going to be working, and so the intervention has begun, and thank you for doing that.
Well, we appreciate you, Kent and Ann. You have been our partners. You've been Da Vinci partners. You've been trusted partners of us both. We appreciate that. Any final comments, Dr. Silvers, you'd like to make before we let them go?
No, I think I just thank you. I look forward to the next step. And so I think that focusing on what those next, I guess, deliverables, for lack of a better term, are, and the timeline for that is important, and definitely look forward to the work. So thank you for this.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
All right, guys,
All right.
we'll let you go. We know you have yet to do this again, so thank you. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All the best to you. It's good to see you all.
All right.
Yes, and thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Well, we have some personnel and negotiation issues in closed session we need to address. Are there any final comments anybody wishes to make about the presentation this evening?
It was a really good presentation. It's hard for me to, I think we all kind of commented, there's so much information, of course, to process. And I know I need help to process it in the way of either discussion or further priority definitions or methodology suggestions. And it's a great place to start. So I guess my frustration is that I want to get started.
Okay. All right, well then, with no further items on the agenda, I will close this meeting and turn us to our closed session with thanks to everybody for joining us tonight.
7 o'clock, Neil, right?
7 o'clock, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.